Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chris and Andre Show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chris and Andre Show. This is episode 75. It looks like we might have to start doing like the show before the show, because my brother is like, he's on his bag lately, man. He's on his bag, yo. Like, I love him, but yo, he's pushing the buttons. It's like,
I mean, that's literally my job over here, is to push the buttons to make the episode go. So what do you want? You push the button. You have it too. Yeah, you have it. That's your job. Andre's afraid he's going to press it wrong.
I got my insecurities. Yeah, everything's good.
Speaking of insecurities, God, I'm so shiny.
Well, what do you do? What do you do? No.
For a living?
So I went to BurgerFi in Raleigh yesterday for lunch.
Yeah. Oh, well, hold up. Before you do that. Cooking. I feel like I need to update that bumper, because we rarely even talk about cooking anymore. It's mostly just food. So it should be like, nom, 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 food, nom, 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 with a...
Well, that might work out. But I went to BurgerFi, and the cashier counter girl was like, "Do you have a name?" And I was like, "Yes." And
my mother gave it to me.
And I was like, "I don't think she's gonna get it."
Would you like to hear it?
And I part of me was just like, probably the question would be, what's the name for the order? But she literally said, "Do you have a name?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Yes." And I was walking away, and I was like, "Oh, you didn't get it." And I said, "Andre." And she smiled, so I knew she wasn't offended. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's I call that my sales persona.
Oh.
Like when I'm on like a business trip, I'm much more like, playful, I guess,
right.
in my interactions, which basically just means like
okay.
I'm my dad. Like I say the same
kind of like webinar
things,
Andre.
Kinda, but it's more like It's like, well, no, because it's not even like podcast Chris, because it's not.
And you don't drop any F-bombs?
Offensive and no, but it's. I don't know what it is. It's just like there's a certain level of comfort with like I think part of it is like I know that I'm here and I'm probably not going to see these people again. Or like in a sales meeting, I like to inject a little bit of humor.
Humor's good.
Humor's good. It is. Like one of the things that my mom taught me, because I work for my mom, but even just in general, is like, you got to make it fun. You got to make the presentation somewhat fun, because these people sit through presentation after presentation after presentation, and if you can make it fun, you'll make it more memorable, and they're more likely to come back because they at least enjoy it, even if they're not able to use any of the stuff that you're ultimately.
We just want to see them again. We're not gonna buy anything.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to hear your stupid jokes. Like. She would like all the calls that I went on with her early. She'd be like going through stuff, and she'd be like, "That's it," and they'd be like, "Oh, okay," and she'd be like, "But wait, there's more." And then she'd bring out like a bag of stuff that she's just like these random things that she's collected over the years. And like, have I ever shown you this, or what about this? And people are always like, "Oh,
that's
the bag
cool.
of stuff."
That's dope.
Like, they know that it's coming now.
That's her shtick.
Yeah, like it's. Yeah, that's kind of her shtick.
Yo, I made this vegan tofu deli meat. Gosh.
Yeah.
It's a banger, yo.
What kind of deli meat is it?
I've made turkey and smoked ham. And it is bananas. Okay. So
I thought you said it was tofu.
Father, grant me the strength and the patience to remember who I want to be, not who I am. Yeah, it's actually, where did I get the recipes from? I was browsing around on the internet somewhere, and just looking for, like, 'cause I love sandwiches. That's one of my things. And but I've actually started to get really crave tomato sandwiches, like tomato with lettuce and other stuff on it, and avocado. It's like really good. But I was like, nah, I'd like to see if there's a possibility of making like a real vegan deli slice. And my wife had been buying these packs of vegan deli slices. They're like $6. You get like 10 or 12 slices. It's not cheap at all.
It's not cheap. Vegan stuff in general, especially the protein or the meat replacement stuff, tends to be pretty.
And I found this recipe, and if I could remember the person so I can give them a shout out, it's bananas, man. It's really really good. So when I made the first batch, I gave some to my daughter. I'm like, hey, just tell me, because my wife, she gives me like it's good, but. And I don't want to hear. I just want to hear, like, is it good or not? Like,
I don't want to hear your criticism. Just tell me it's delicious and leave me the hell alone.
I just want, it's good or not good.
No, I hear exactly what you're saying. Like, like when I make stuff, the other night I made mashed potatoes, and like Christy's very particular about her mashed potatoes because she makes really, really good mashed potatoes. And this was like just kind of we don't know what we're having, so I'm going to throw something together. But I was like, they got to be somewhat decent, or she's just going to not eat them. And so she went back for seconds, and I was like, all right, that's a good sign. But of course, like, I had to be like, so did I do good? Like I had to get that verbal validation. But
what my wife does is she'll play me, right? She'll be like, oh, it was good, and then like a few hours later, that was really good, but I'm like, no, you can't do that. You got to say it's either good or not good on the first taste, and then I can make adjustments, right? But my daughter tried she actually tried both varieties, and she was like, this is really good, but I really like the turkey flavor. And I'm like, well, that's dope. So, and I know
but she said but too.
Yeah, but she says, she said but my favorite is blah, not the extra like commentary. And I was like, yo, this is really good. And I made like a bunch of sandwiches. It's really, the tofu gives it a better base. It's got some vital wheat gluten in it also, but the tofu makes it just more like, I don't know. It's actually like a deli slice chew and a bite to it, which is kind of interesting. I didn't think that would be the case. Nor did I think that tofu could be like the base of another, like a real base of something else, and would hold its texture, if that makes sense. I was kind of skeptical of that, but it was really good.
A lot of the times it depends on how you prepare the tofu. So, like a lot of it, like if we order tofu from, like a little hole-in-the-wall Japanese, or not Japanese, but like a Chinese place, or, some Chinese food place. Asian food is what it really ought to be called. It's like a Taco Bell for Chinese food. It's not really Chinese food. But like half the time you'll get it, and it's just this like spongy, gooey, like not gooey, but just like the spongy blob of nothing. Like there's no flavor, there's no texture to it. It's just kind of like, ugh. Or it'll be like really chewy, and it's like because you have to press and drain as much of the liquid out as you can without overdoing it. You don't want to like super compress it. One of the things that I've done that I did once, and it's a little time consuming, so I haven't gotten a chance to do it again, but I really enjoyed the texture, was dehydrating tofu. So using my the Ninja Foodie has a dehydrator setting on it, and so you slice it into relatively thin slices and then just leave it in there for a few hours to dehydrate, and it helps just to get all of that moisture out. And then what you can basically do is rehydrate it in whatever marinade or spices or whatever it is that you're wanting to add.
See, that's the type of stuff that I like. Like I'm going to tell you where I got that recipe from, because I use Nextcloud, and if you don't know, it's like your own personal Dropbox, blah blah blah. You figure out whatever that means to you. It's the website.
Thank God they're not paying us for this plug because it's like Dropbox, a competitor. You figure out what that means.
People use Dropbox for different things, right? Like I know.
I know.
Like,
it's just
if Nextcloud, they're open source, so they're probably never going to be a sponsor. But I love it. It's great for geeks like me. The website is 86eats.com, and there's a lot of recipes.
The number 86 or is it okay?
Not spelled out.
Not
86eats.com, and with an
How do you spell eats?
Eat. EATS.
Is there also an A?
.com.
Oh, okay, because you just said with an E, so it's like I'm like, how do you make the rest of the sounds?
With letters. But I swear to God, man, like this guy moves away now. He's like all froggy and like I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are we here? Why?
Ribbit.
But I will say that, and the reason I mentioned Nextcloud is because another thing I was actually going to do was to write a recipe app, because I hate most recipe apps I've tried to use. But I found one that's a plug-in type app for Nextcloud, and that's where I put a lot of my notes and document, and I use I keep all of my working files in Nextcloud, and it made perfect sense to be able to have my recipes there. I can take recipes, take the URL. If they're using now I can't think of the name of the format. There's a format that you can use, like rich content or some crap like that. I don't remember what it's called. But most current and contemporary websites, when they have recipes, you can actually there's a separate format under or with the HTML to where you can take that URL and just have the recipe show up. I was like, hey, that's exactly what I need. So I'll find recipes on the internet now, and I can just bring it into my Nextcloud instance and have all the ingredients and everything like that. It's brilliant. It's awesome. I love it. So
that was a much better ad for Nextcloud.
Well, thank you. I'm always trying to try harder.
But seriously, that sounds really cool. I mean, because one of the things that I hate about recipe hunting on the internet is, where do you keep it all? It's like, Pinterest was a place that I had tried doing that, but I really hate the organization on Pinterest just in general. It gets really confusing. There's a app called Meal Time or Cook Time or something like that. I tried using that for a while, and it wasn't bad. Like you can enter like your own recipes. So I would start doing that, where it's like creating my own recipes within the app itself, so that I had things so that when I would go shopping, you can like sync it to your grocery list and stuff like that, so you can see. It is definitely clunky, like, and the way that you tracks the weeks and the days and stuff like that, like, should be much easier to, make adjustments and stuff. Because then, it's like you miss a day or you're doing your meal prep on a different day than you normally would, and it gets all screwy. But yeah, so that's interesting though.
It's actually called Open Recipe Format. So there's a bunch of structured data formats that you can program, or it's not really programming, but write into HTML for tweets and all of the types of stuff. But I find it a lot easier as I'm browsing it, like probably once or twice a month. I'll go outside of my cookbooks and look for different recipes. And it's just really simple to take a recipe from the website itself and not have to copy and paste and crap like that. So, I really do enjoy it. But the vegan deli meat, it's legit. I
don't think I've done like a new recipe in a really long time. I've just been cooking a lot of the same. It's been very basic lately. Like, I don't know if it's just because I'm in my parents' house, and so it's like, life is a little bit different. I don't have all of my kitchen appliances at my disposal. So, like, I don't have my food processor. I brought my Ninja Foodie with me because I was like, I can't live without it. I must have my air fryer.
So I needed a food processor for this recipe, right? And I was like, I'll just go buy a food processor, not a big deal. And my daughter's like, she's like, no, Dad, look at this one. Oh, so the one I was going to buy was like $60, right? And the one that she was like, no, it's a food
Yeah.
processor and a blender. And I'm like, oh. It's like Tim Allen out. I'm like, yeah, that's great. So it was like $120, but it's actually pretty good. I can knead dough in it. It's like just amazing. Because I do spend a lot more time in the kitchen. So yeah, I would really recommend, like, if you're still on that whole diet thing, and every now and then I eat seafood because, you know, again, Puerto Rico, it's just kind of like, when I say that, it's like, my wife's like, "Did you tell Chris?" I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, I went to Puerto Rico, like, it's fresh seafood. I said, but don't get it twisted.
Mean, like, I'm not.
I know,
the
but
vegan
what pisses me
police,
off is like we import 65, in some places say 80% of our seafood. I'm like, don't we have fish here? Where are we getting these fish from?
Yeah, I mean, there are places down here in Wilmington that import.
How and why?
Fish.
It's crazy.
I mean, Gordon Ramsay and John Taffer used to find it on restaurants all the time, where people were importing frozen stuff from way far away, as opposed to using local, you know, fishermen, because they never. It's like the thought doesn't cross their mind. You know, they think it's cheaper to buy frozen crap. And it's like, no, all you're doing is diminishing the quality of your product, and therefore causing people to not want to come back to your restaurant.
We'll talk. I know there's a lot of things about restaurants we'll get to, but anyway, let's talk about sports.
Sports.
And I've said this time and time again. I
can't even believe that what I read as the first like sports topic here. Like I was thinking about it on my drive over here. Like, I wonder how much preseason football Andre has watched, because the Denver Broncos have been looking pretty good, but he's going to be like, it's preseason. Show me in the real season when it actually counts. And no, instead he's like, my Denver Broncos are 3-0 and they beat the Seattle Seahawks last night. Yeah, I get it. You know, like, congratulations. Teddy Bridgewater is going to be your quarterback.
I think
maybe.
he may get the starting job. Like, they're both.
So is that
no?
it
I think
for Drew Lock,
they're pretty
then?
close in stats. And one of the things I was reading was the dropbacks that Drew Lock had to face, where the O-line was weak. And I've said this time and time.
Is he playing behind a different O-line than Teddy Bridgewater?
Well, there are two different types of quarterbacks, right? So if you exclude those, and actually Fangio said, I'm going to have to watch that game with a remote in my hand to see what the difference was. I'm like, I can respect that, because it's true. There are two different types of quarterbacks. Locke is mobile, but he's not Bridgewater mobile. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, I mean, he's white.
I was trying not to say it.
I know. I'll say it. Like, Drew Lock is sneaky athletic, not athletic.
I got nothing after that, yo. I really don't. But I will say that I still think that Drew Lock, from what I've seen and what I appreciate about him as a quarterback, I think he's probably the right long-term quarterback. Now, whether he gets the time to prove that, that's debatable, outside of my control. I really feel like there's an advantage. He doesn't have anything to prove. Like, to be honest, like, it's not about the position. He doesn't have anything to prove, because he got a full, pretty, give or take a full season. People will give him the benefit of the doubt. Teddy Bridgewater could play himself into an injury.
I mean, yeah, he got injured last year, right, playing in Carolina, and that affected his ability to be effective the rest of the season, which I think was ultimately what that, and I mean, I know that the coaching staff had mentioned, like Carolina's coaching staff had mentioned, some issues that they had with late game decision making and stuff like that, and which I think was
it's relative. It's relative,
whatever.
and it's factual. That's my hesitation of starting the guy. It's like he's got too much to prove. He'll make mistakes that cost you games. But
He could, but I think he's shown at times the ability to be a solid
Yes.
QB. Not an all-star, right, or an all-pro or a Pro Bowler, but like he's probably a top middle third of the league quarterback, and probably in the top half of that middle third.
So when I watch some tape on Bridgewater, he kind of reminds me of Cam Newton, where you kind of make some careless decisions and it doesn't bode well, and that's what that's what I don't like about it. It's like, now if you're trying to win games, that's not what you need. You need consistency. You need to understand the probability of like realistic errors, right? I may get a bad read. I may, I may chase myself into a bad situation, but it's not like I'm not trying to compete with myself on the field. And that's a lot what I feel with Cam Newton, like outside of his attitude. That's my major criticism of the guy. And I see the same thing with Bridgewater. So, I wouldn't be, unless there's something, of course there will be something that I don't know why they make the decision of starting the guy for even the first part of the season. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like, well, if that's the case, understand this is what it's going to cost you. That's the type of player I see when I see him play. So.
How about the rest of the team?
The potential starting lineup, it's not different from last year. I'm not okay with the running back situation there. But that's personal preference. But you look.
Well, yeah, I mean, you were a big.
Yeah, I think
Philip
Lindsay is the type of guy you want to start, and that can give you like 5-6 good seasons. If he's. Yeah.
And he's down in Houston now, right, with the Texans. Yeah. So you've got Melvin Gordon, and then who else is behind Gordon? In the
Freeman, Royce Freeman.
Anybody of note?
Yeah, and Freeman's Freeman's that guy. Like he had a good start his first season. But he wasn't the guy.
Yeah.
But I think Denver has a unique situation with the running game. Right? They normally don't screw it up. I mean, for some reason that's one of the squads that can figure out how to run the ball.
Yeah. I mean, for the longest time, they were one of the few squads that was running the zone blocking on the offensive line. And so that was a big part of it. At least that was always my understanding, was that allowed them to be much more effective in the run game. But, yeah, I mean, Denver's just in general kind of had a good track record of solid running backs, and I know you're not a huge Melvin Gordon fan. Just it compared to Philip Lindsay. I think ultimately for the organization, it seems like it came down to a matter of money, that Lindsay was due a new contract, and so it's like, well, we'd love to keep you, but we aren't able to.
I think it was more of a willing to. And Melvin Gordon's
pay you what you're going to.
I think Melvin Gordon probably has like at best 2-3 seasons left. And I look at teams on a long-term play. I don't look at them so much on the, what am I going to get for like the next, 2 seasons. That's a terrible way to look at it. I just think it's.
I don't know, if you win 2 Super Bowls in those years, it's not.
Yeah,
bad.
but they're not at. They're not at that.
I just say, I mean, you look at like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where they kind of went all in on this Tom Brady thing. And they're going to get as many years out of it as they can. Probably another 1 or 2, this year or next.
But they also they brought on a lot of veterans also. So that wasn't like Brady was a big part of the puzzle, but they also were willing to say, let's support this team with this. And I think most of their defensive line is like pretty young. So Tampa's got to play on points. They can't play on defense, if I'm being honest. Like they've got to play on points scored as opposed to points defended.
Although their defense looked good against Kansas City in the Super Bowl.
Not going to deny that, but their objective is on points scored more so than, in my opinion, and I could be wrong. Yeah,
well, that's Bruce Arians.
That's true. Yeah. So anyway, and I wasn't going to bring up the Seahawks, but I was just saying I think overall Denver looks good coming coming around the corner out of preseason, which has been like 5-6 years where that's been the case.
I mean, Seattle looks like doo-doo, but they haven't had Russell Wilson out there, so I'm willing to wait and see.
But what does that tell you about the future of Seattle, right? What does their bench look like?
It's doo-doo. I mean, really, and this is, I'm not saying, get rid of Pete Carroll, but he doesn't have that much longer left to coach anyways.
He's a good coach, man.
And he is. I'm just saying, at some point, they're going to have to get
I think their problem is back office. I don't think it's him. Yeah. I'm starting to get a feel, and I've been reading more of the trades lately in sports, and I see more, even with the Yankees, it's, the back office can screw up a lot,
So you talk about, the GM and stuff like that? But then, I don't know. I feel like Pete Carroll has this vision of what his football team looks like, right? And it's primarily a downhill running team. And it seems to me like he's kind of come hell or high water, we're going to pound the shit out of the football and then do play action pass over the top. And I don't know, maybe it's that, I'm rebirthing this trend now that everybody else is going the spread and, throw the ball around, and I'm going to be the contrarian that defenses have to prepare for. But, you got guys like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and it's not that Chris Carson's not a good running back. It just, you've historically not had a very good offensive line.
And that's been the problem. We've talked about that multiple times. It's
yeah. And I guess, that's where, the back office comes into play, is trying to figure out the offensive line.
Yeah, I think a lot of the trades, I was watching some pitcher swaps or potential pitcher swaps. I'm like, but why would you drop a guy that's strong for 4 to 5 innings, right? It doesn't make sense to me to pick up Billy, right? So it's it doesn't make sense. But I'm also anti-salary cap. But I don't want to dig too deep in the woods. I don't like that part of sports. Because I think it kind of ruins.
We've talked about that before.
I hate it. I do not enjoy it. But before I forget, Messi is going to PSG. Gosh.
Yeah.
That's dope. I just love Messi. I have nothing but good things to say about Messi. I will say this, and this is what I want to talk about, with soccer. The European leagues are among the most racist individuals on the planet. And I struggle watching European matches at all. I typically watch South and Central America. So hats off to the U.S. men's team that won the Gold Cup. That's dope. Yeah, they did. And they sucked in the Olympics again. Or they didn't make it there. They're probably going to get swamped in the World Cup, I think. But I think they'll get to the semifinals. Yeah. But anyway, that's...
Hey, we won something.
Dude.
Somewhere.
The goal, the couple oro is the least important thing in the world. It's
I know it is. That's why I'm saying we won something.
Most Americans don't even know that's a thing. I'm it's
nobody even knew we were playing for it until we won. You think anybody was actually sitting around watching, and then all of a sudden it was we won a soccer thing?
Yeah, they don't even
See, America is good at everything. We won the Olympics. Oh, but China got more gold medals than you did. Whatever. We got more overall medals. Overall, total counts. It's not if you ain't first, you're last. No, that's Ricky Bobby thinking. You could be second, third. Hell,
it's
you can
crazy.
Even be fourth. Wait, you don't get medals for fourth place at the Olympics?
You get a smaller trophy. But anyway, I don't like Jake Paul. Not because I don't.
What?
Yeah, but I want to see.
You're the only one. Everybody else I know just loves that.
I hope
dude. I got posters of him in my bedroom.
I'm looking forward to Tyron Woodley taking him on, but his quote, he wants to rid the combat sports community of the YouTube bitch once and for all. And I hope he does.
Which is fine with me. I mean, like, yeah, I would love nothing more because I'm with you in that I can't stand Jake Paul. I feel like this has been nothing but a massive publicity stunt for him and these other people to rake in money. The whole Mayweather, right? Wasn't that?
That was his brother, though. Yeah, it was his brother.
Wait, it was?
Don't make me fact check myself.
Well, no, I thought that was the same guy.
Yeah, I just think Mayweather. Who did he fight? Logan Paul. Yeah, he fought his brother. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Well, then I didn't realize that there was another Paul that's trying to get into boxing.
Now the brother, like Logan, is a younger one, I believe.
Yeah,
and I just think, like, look, I'm not trying to. First of all, I'm not going to step in the ring with kid because that's not my thing, right? And I'm about to be 45, so I got to respect the fact that I'm not like a 26-year-old kid trying to throw arms for like 5-6 rounds. But if it was like toe to toe, knuckle down, and there was no restrictions, I totally see Mayweather cleaning that kid's clock. Like, I don't even know why that wasn't the outcome of that fight. So,
because that wasn't what they scripted.
It's annoying.
I'm with you, right? But this is all just been this massive money play. The whole thing, like it's been, I'm going to fight this dude. And everybody's like, you're going to get your ass kicked. And he wins. And everybody's like, what? And then I'm going to fight this other dude. And they're like, all right, I mean, that dude's not really like a boxer, but he's a professional fighter, so he's probably going to kick your butt. And then he knocks that dude out. And everybody's like, all right, this dude's really starting to piss me off.
The kid he fought was like twice retired or something. So it's like...
Yeah, and he wasn't a boxer. He was a
fighter.
What do you call it? Yeah, but he was like a grappler. Like he was a ground wrestler kind of guy, not a striker, even amongst the MMA UFC stuff. And so then it's the Mayweather fight, which has all this drama and build up because he's snatching his hat and it's all, like, oh, they're going to... And then what does Mayweather do? He dances around for however many rounds. And it's like it's a draw or whatever, like you're telling me. I mean, like I'm with you, right? Like if Mayweather really didn't like that guy as much as he pretended to not like that guy, there's no way they walk out of that first round
with kid's eye without still clean. He would have been clocked like 20 times.
Exactly. There's no way. Not even. Mayweather out there, like, he would have just been like, or maybe by the third or fourth round at least, like, maybe he's like, all right, I'm not going to do that thing where I get over anxious or over excited and, like, get caught off guard. But, like, eventually, like, he's going to knock this dude a few times. And that never happened. So the only thing I can assume is that everybody was on the take and it was all scripted and they all got their checks and that's all that mattered, you know? Like... And that's what this is going to be, too. Like, I hate to say it, but this feels like this is... I mean, like, you think one of these guys is legitimately going to step into the ring with the threat of, like...
Well, I think it's there's a power imbalance, right? So this kid's a striker from what I read, and his strike game is pretty good, so he could potentially hurt this guy, right? And I don't wish ill will on anybody, but it's like, yo, stop calling people out, B. Like, you're going to... you're going to call the...
I'm tired
I
of
don't want to
show.
That's why people don't watch boxing. Like, everybody's like I have some friends that are like, yeah, remember this? I'm like, yeah, but they're not heavyweights. Like, I don't watch any heavyweight, like, major titles because they're all crap. Everything is middleweight. It's like welterweight and middleweights.
It's like when people got, like, really into the Kimbo Slice fights, like the bum fights on the street, and it's like, this dude is literally getting paid a ham sandwich to get knocked the fuck out. Like, to lose some teeth to Kimbo Slice. And that's what you want to watch? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's... To some degree, I feel like it's the overall degradation of...
Combat sports are not the same as they used to be. I think UFC messed that up.
I don't know.
Because there's some. I think there
ahead.
are some rules that like, and this is obviously my opinion. I don't need to clarify that, but it's like, when you have a guy that his main sport is striking or boxing against a grappler or jiu-jitsu, that is not going to be a fair fight, because your probability of actually grabbing that guy is a snowball's chance in hell. And that's pretty much every UFC title fight. You have guys from two different disciplines where it's not even fair for the first part, and somebody's getting knocked out. It's never it's rarely a submission.
Which is ultimately the goal, right? Like, what does UFC want more than anything? But, like, roundhouse kicks that lead to knockouts, big uppercuts, guys getting their face pounded in while they're unconscious on the mat or up against the cage. And, I mean, I don't know. I was never super into, like, boxing either. Not that I feel like they're on the same level in that regard, but I do feel like there was an element in boxing that's kind of like
there's technique in boxing.
I don't know,
there's technique.
Yeah, and it's not that there isn't technique in like UFC and stuff, but I'm with you in that it's ultimately like it's a style of boxing versus another style of boxing. Not can I punch you versus can
grab
you grab my ankle and make me and it's not, I don't know, like I get it's the whole like blood sport, Jean-Claude Van Damme movie thing where it's like, oh, which style is the best? How do we determine? And the only way is to just put him in a ring and let him duke it out.
I'm not a wrestler. Like if you take me to the ground, you're probably going to win. But I'm not going to let you take me to the ground. I don't have the body makeup to be a wrestler, period. I don't want to wrestle you. I don't want you moving my arm where it shouldn't be, anything like that. I'm going to knock you out, whether that's with my hands or my feet. So I can just imagine myself like in a UFC match. And I got a buddy that does a UFC. He's a short guy. He's like 5'8", 5'10", some crap like that. And I'm like, how do you like that? Like, that can't be okay.
Really? He's a short guy. Let me sandwich your height with the two heights that I described, Chris.
But he's fighting guys that are like 6 feet, 6'1". So they got him on reach by automatically 3 to 4 inches, right?
The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
They got to run into your fists, right? Like those are things where it's like, it's not a sport anymore. It's a sport, but it's like, if you're the guy that grapples or you're the guy with the ground game, you're at a disadvantage. Like you're literally at a disadvantage. Conor McGregor would be the exception to the rule because he's got a good punch, right? And he's got a good ground game. So I'm not on that.
Yeah, but that dude's like...
I'm not, aside from everything else about Conor McGregor, and I'm not trying, like, Mr. McGregor, not trying to call you out. I'm just saying, like, you're a unicorn when it comes to that. You've got a good ground game. You've got a good stand-up game. You can probably hold your own either or, right?
I don't know why you're still speaking in the present tense. He had a good ground game. He had a good stand-up game. Then he broke his ankle. Now he can't stand up at all. So it's only the ground game. No, but I mean, like, I hear what you're saying. I'm not a Conor McGregor fan in general either. What was it, him and Mayweather that had the fight too?
I remember when everybody's like, yo, McGregor's going to knock him out. I'm like, he's not going to, number one, he's not going to touch him. Number two.
But that was like the same
deal,
actually,
that was
Mayweather just danced around the ring for most
of
it.
But Mayweather's a boxer. Like,
I understand that, but I'm just saying, like,
it's not dancing around the ring. It's like, look, if I don't have to go and get that touch, why am I going to go in, right?
No, I mean, I do understand that. I do. Just the strategy.
Yeah, the strategy. I mean, if you look at Sugar Ray Leonard, same thing. You look at Camacho, same thing. You look at, and I've watched a lot of boxing, right? And you'll notice, like, the lower the weight class you go, the more ring movement there is. You don't have a lot of toe-to-toe boxing in the upper weight classes. It's just not a thing. Tyson was not moving around the ring. He was pounding you out. Holyfield was pounding you out. Foreman was pounding you out. Muhammad Ali was the unicorn. right? That's what people like. Oh, he's not in there. I'm like, he doesn't have to be in there because he's pacing you. It's 12 rounds. He's got to pace it out. You can't go 12 rounds of just toe to toe. It's not physically possible. Yeah. And so that's where it's like, for me, it's like, no, I get that. People want to criticize Mayweather for, taking advantage of the ring. I don't see it that way. I see it as
no, it's just that people wanted
a toe-to-toe
to see
fight.
This kid get they wanted to see Logan Paul get knocked out. Like that's, yeah, I know, but that's why people were criticizing Mayweather. It had another, I mean, that's just my opinion, but I think it had way more to do with that. Like they were like, I paid thinking that I was going to see you knock him out, and instead, this is what I had to watch. And I mean, I understand why. I'm not saying I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say that it was a money grab.
It wasn't. Well, I will say it was a money grab.
But I get also, if you're like what you're saying with Mayweather, it's like, if I don't have to go in and get hit, why am I going to go in and get hit? I mean, the worst thing for him is, Logan Paul catches him off guard with a punch and knocks him down once. Then he's
going to kill that kid.
So for him, well, but you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
For him, it was as much about all I got to do is sit back and kind of play defense, because ultimately, what I'm not going to do is look like these other bums that he's fought previously.
And that's fair. Let's talk about some pop culture.
Pop culture.
Yo, all right, I'm gonna put this in there. I know you're not ready for it. I caught up on my Jersey Shore. Gosh, man, I love that show. I shouldn't love that show, but
so thank you for coming to the Chris and Andre show. It's been a good episode. This is where we'll be cutting things off early, because for the love of God, I do not understand your fascination with Jersey Shore. I like trashy TV. Love Island, I think, past season was awful.
Is that joint on Netflix or Fox?
I think it's on Hulu. Yeah, I think it's on Fox.
I never watched that. But Jersey Shore is just it's amazing, man. You know what
aren't they 60
They're your
now?
age, B.
Well, exactly. And I'm practically 60.
They are your age. It's I think it's hilarious. It's just, what I love about the show is it's a sociological experiment, right? When they were younger in their 20s, they were just reckless. And sometimes it was hard to watch, right? Now that they're older, it's like they're putting the brakes on the stuff they used to do, which I find equally hilarious. It's that's interesting. The kid, Mike, quote unquote, the situation makes, he makes $2.9 million a season, which I find just outrageous. Outrageous.
You're helping.
Well, yeah, I don't care.
Contribute.
He makes 100. He makes $150K an episode. That's dope. And it's just watching him grow into an adult, right? He's having his first kid, but also remember the fact that he was a complete douchebag when he was younger. It's interesting for me. I find it very interesting. And that is why I keep watching it. It's not because I'm oh, this is riveting. It's no, these guys are bananas, yo. And they make no sense. None of their life choices are good. It's just hilarious to watch.
So it's the train wreck that you can't look away from, basically. Okay. I mean, and that's kind of Love Island was very much the same, where it's these people are all just a bunch of morons who have but there's no redeemable element to it
and
whatsoever.
that would probably turn me off. But I do like the fact that these guys are they're having families, they're trying to figure, you go through those things.
I guess I'm just saying to have gotten into it at the beginning and to still be invested at this point.
It's amazing.
It is. I'm amazed by you being able to. It's just, come on, this is so not the Andre Powell content. This is some white people shit that you're into here.
But it's also funny to see why people do some dumb stuff.
I mean, you're not wrong. Like, we're hilarious.
I find it very entertaining. Gabsy
here.
I love that crap, man. And that kid.
You used to really piss people off in the area with that. Like, people would get very upset because you would scream it.
I know. Gabsy here.
I know you know.
But what are they going to say? Like, somebody go tell the
Nothing.
6'1" black guy to stop saying Gabsy here. No, but you know what I do like about that kid, Paulie D? Seriously, like, he's a genuinely happy person, right? And this is like full context. He's got a kid. Him and the mom didn't work out, but he still finds joy in his life, right? And he's genuinely a happy person. He enjoys like his life, and those are things, if you like, for me, not just for the garbage, but if you look at the subtext, we're always trying to figure out how to get to where we're trying to go, and to watch that, evolution in that show is kind of interesting to me. Like, I'm fascinated by how people make decisions, how they, how do they reel themselves back in. So I laugh, but I'm also thinking about what I really care about. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And that takes some of the fun out of the show, but I find it hilarious. It's just like, I was once 22. I was once 24, and I'll be 45 now. Like, what things did I do at that age, and how did I kind of struggle through and navigate, blah, blah, blah. Now, granted, I wasn't like just getting drunk every night and wasted and jumping off of balconies and crap like that, but the social experiment is still kind of real. It's interesting to see what that looks like for looking on the outside.
Sure. I mean, like, I used to love The Real World and Road Rules. Back when
I watched the Real World. I didn't like it when they started doing all those games. I'm like, I don't want to watch the games.
Well, that became the whole point. It was like, and now MTV has their own show where it's basically just the games. Like, they don't even bother having Real World or Road Rules. It's just like, no, just come be on this game show, like, where we're gonna have you do ridiculous stuff, and at the same time, we hope that you all sleep together and make drunk decisions that we can laugh at for years.
But the ironic part is, like, they figured something out, right? Like, so reality TV, at its core, we want to know what those decisions look like, right? We may not want to participate, sure, but it's interesting to see that, right? So you're looking through, you're on the outside looking in at what people do or how they think or feel about something. That's interesting, right? The science of that is interesting. When they take that away, like, or you kind of like put crack in it and turn to the Kardashians, that's not real world to people, right? Most people aren't.
It's not the real world to anybody. It's not even the real world to them. Like, no, and I'm with you. I mean, it was, there's been lots of shows where, I mean, it's the bulk of reality television at all these days. I mean, even shows like, say, American Pickers, right? It was great when it first came on. These guys, like, traipsing through the backwoods of America and finding all these cool antiques that they, are going to salvage and turn into profit for themselves. But then, like, what took probably 3 to 5 years to film and collect enough for the first season, right? Oh, this is great. We got to do a whole season's worth in less than a year, right? So now that you speed run it, so now everything becomes staged. It was the same thing with Pawn Stars, like, same thing with the Orange Choppers, Orange County Choppers, like, all of that stuff that at first has this level of authenticity to it, eventually gets eroded away into
monetize it.
Predictable script, monetized script, so that we can get through an episode and have something to produce, so that we have advertisers happy. Like, and I feel like they started doing the same thing with a lot of, like, the Road Rules and Real World stuff, where it became all about, like, instigating, conflict between house members and encouraging, like, people who are in serious relationships to go and cheat on their spouse because it's going to make for good television. Everybody's going to want to see that. And it's like, these are people's lives that you're ultimately
screwing
like
over.
Exactly. Like, I mean, it's really.
But you have to agree that the real secret sauce is, like, we're all interested, right? We all struggle with the same things. Like, that's we don't get to. We can.
I guess I feel like you're interested in the same way that, like, you. like you take issue with the fact that the most visited sites on the internet are porn sites, right? Like, to some degree, I take issue with the fact that The Bachelor, or The Bachelorette is some of like the highest rated television that we have, because I feel like you're playing to the lowest common denominator in that style of entertainment. It's our basest, emotions, and it's almost like this. I want to see these people suffer. Like, I want to see these girls get rejected. It's not about like, I'm not saying that's for you, but
because I would be very.
You get a lot of people who kind of. Yeah, but you get a lot of people who are like, bitch, like, you deserve that. It's like, you don't know her. She's been on this show for like 3 weeks. And you've seen
you
two
want her
things.
downfall.
Exactly. And then 5 years later, when she's the Bachelor or Bachelorette, then it's going to be like, oh, look at how far she came, because, God, we love a redemption story. We just want to break people down so that then we can champion them when we build them back up.
I mean,
that. Like, what is it? The runner who got banned from the Olympics, right? So that, I feel like the same thing there, where it's like, oh, she's got an issue. Let's tear her down so that eventually she can redeem herself, and then this is another American redemption story. Oh wait, but she finished last.
Yeah, like in Utah. But she was. But here's what I thought was ironic about that was she was like, "Keep talking all this shit. I'm not going anywhere." Right. So I think there are
I mean, nothing against her.
I can't run that fast.
I can't go out there and run. So yeah,
I'm about to be 45. I'm like, yo, Ma, you do what you got to do, yo.
My knees hurt walking up the stairs.
Yes. So my thing is like, yes, you're right. Right. We look at that is a very good analysis. We watch porn. We want to see people struggle and fail. I personally don't. I want to see like what happens next. So when I watch Jersey Shore Family Reunion, what I'm looking for, like, or what I enjoy is the fact that these aren't the same kids that they were 10 years ago, right? You can always have that redemption story if you're provided the opportunity to change, if people don't beat you up. And I'll cap it off with this, like the kid that, or the guy that was going to be the Jeopardy host. He had something on a podcast like 8 years in the past, and people like indicted him for it. I'm like, wait a minute. So what we're saying here is you don't get to change. Like at this standard, you can't change because you should have known in the past that what you're saying was wrong. Well, that's
which I think is a big issue that a lot of people take with the whole like quote unquote woke culture, right? Where it's this belief that anything you've ever said is something that you believe into infinity, and that you are at any moment when society changes its mind in terms of how we view things, we can go back and relitigate how it is that you behaved previously, right? And I'm with you in that. I think that's crap. Like, I think with the Jeopardy host, Mike Richards, I think, right, to me, that was, people weren't happy because they didn't like the way that went. They didn't like him in particular, and so it was, let's get rid of this guy. It was kind of like the, I mean, to some degree, the epitome of what I think the right, or, like Republicans have been kind of claiming is happening to everyone in this cancel culture, whatever you want to call it. Like, where it's like, it's almost this, let's just find a reason to get rid of this guy, even if it's not super legitimate, even if it's not something that he's done recently. And I don't know. What is the same thing with the other host that they announced, right? Mian Bialik. I can't remember.
She played Blossom.
Yeah, and was on, has been on The Big Bang Theory and all that stuff, but she had some posts that people were interpreting as potentially being anti-vax.
She's a brain surgeon. She's literally a brain surgeon or neuroscientist. Yeah. So here's my...
So, it's just... I mean, I'm with you in that. I think ultimately, like, people are going to find issue when they want to with whatever decisions you make, right? It's like, are you comfortable with the decision that you made? To me, with CBS,
ABC.
That to me said more than anything, ABC, like, we aren't comfortable with the decision that we made or backing it up at this point, so we feel like the easier play is to move on.
Well,
and I'm not saying it's the right one, but I'm just saying, like, ultimately that's how
and
they
that's
look
fair.
at it.
But if that were true, like if that way of thinking were true, and there's going to be a penalty for having a thought, then I should hold myself responsible for being homophobic because I didn't know any different. Right?
Right.
And that's just like, it's all well and good and that's why I always caution people like, hey, you may not really believe that. You may feel strongly about it, but you can't cement your beliefs to something that you're not really informed about. And I think a lot of people, they cement their beliefs to what they're not really informed about. I know when I was younger, I believed a lot of things. When I didn't have kids, I believed a lot of things. When I had kids, I stopped believing some of the things I believed when I was before I had kids. When I got older, I'm like, I really don't believe that plus this. So to say that people can't change and mature and to keep mounting social pressure for conformity is ridiculous. I just think that is like, and I don't want to go like woke, not woke, because I hate the term in general. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, please tell me that you can't indict somebody for what they did when they were in high school. You can't indict somebody for what they believe when they're in college. Their world.
Right, like, what's the statute of limitations on this, ultimately, right? We have that legally. Yeah. So socially, what is the statute of limitations on this, right? I mean, at some point, like you're saying, I mean, each one of us is allowed to say, I may have said that previously, but I no longer believe that. And again, like, I think even in this case, right? Like, if ABC really felt like he was the right guy for the job, they could have easily had him come out and say, yes, I said these things in the past, but I no longer believe them, and then whatever from there, that you feel you want or need to do to try and assure people of that, whether it's, I'm committed to blah, blah, blah. I don't even care. But it's like, no, instead they just pulled the plug because they thought that was the easier thing to do. It's easier than trying to sit there and dig yourself out of this.
But these are the same people that would probably rally behind James Gunn in the crappy Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Or Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like, yo, you can't play both sides of the fence here. And since I mentioned it, the Suicide Squad still sucked.
Yeah, nothing's changed over the last week. They haven't released the non-James Gunn version. The Snyder cut of the Suicide Squad. Is that what we're gonna get? He comes in and just makes everything dark,
and hopefully
and
better, because
broody, and I don't know. After watching the Army of the Dead, I have very mixed feelings on Zack Snyder in general. Snyder cut was
dope. I did watch. I got caught up on Titan season 3. Man, that show it's brilliant. The one critique I would have is they kind of did some lazy writing with Red Hood, and other than that, it's great. It's the show I need to be watching right now. Have you watched it?
No, I haven't watched any of it. What's it on?
It's on HBO Max now. It used to be a DC Universe. It's a great show.
Right. It's not on Plex?
No, because I'm selfish. Yeah. What else? I watched Marvel's What If. I don't really like it.
I have not watched any of it yet. I've seen the trailers. I don't entirely understand, I guess, like, I mean, I do. I guess just like different timelines, and they are going whole hog on this whole multiverse thing. I mean, the new Spider-Man No Way Home trailer
hasn't dropped yet, but everybody's talking about it. I keep seeing it.
No, it did. I mean, like, it's out there. It's got a whole bunch of Doctor Strange in it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like, it's basically a buddy cop film with Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. Not really, but I don't know. Like,
I'm really trying to, like, I enjoy the What If comics, but I guess I don't care. Well, actually, that's not true.
Which part isn't true?
I don't enjoy the what
like
if comics. I get that it gives the freedom to the artists and the writers to say, what if we took this path here? And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I like the animation style in the series. I don't really necessarily care for the stories. And I think what's bothering me is that they're trying to tie it into the next phase of Marvel, which I really don't appreciate. I'm like, you can't do that.
So, yeah, I think, like, to me, the What If series, and it was always kind of like a side thing, It wasn't the main driving force behind all of this. And I don't know if it's just because they want to be able to add additional, like, titles, or properties that they can eventually expand. And so it's like, well, what if people really like, Agent Carter as, the British Captain
Actually,
America.
I would never like that because there's already a Captain Britain.
No, I mean, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it's not you, but... And not that one in particular, but it's like, oh, okay, people really like this. We're going to make a whole series out of this, and...
I'm struggling with it. Like, I've watched every episode, and I'm like, I don't... There's not enough context to it. So it's kind of like one of those things where my wife always criticizes American serials or soap operas, like, because they're too long, right? But sometimes you need them to be longer to tell the story. Like The Office would be a good example. Like The Office doesn't make sense in 2 or 3 seasons. It makes sense on their run.
Right. Although the BBC version was only 2 or 3 seasons.
And I think that's probably how Americans consume stories, though, right? If that makes sense.
No, there is a difference. I mean, I agree, right? Because the vast majority of British comedy or British television, aside from, like, Doctor Who, are short run, 2 or 3 seasons. That's just generally how they kind of do it. And I don't know, like, I find value in both, right? The ability to tell a succinct story in a short amount of time without having these, like, because in American television, where we ended up at times, were filler seasons.
The entirety of Lost.
Yeah, season 3 in particular of Lost was the most pointless season of television probably ever. Other than
and the freaking zombie crap. What is that crap called? Walking Dead?
Yeah.
God, I hate that shit.
That's another one, right? Where it's just like because it's making money, they don't stop doing it. And it's not that it's not to say that there aren't people out there who still enjoy that stuff, right? It's just it's not for you and I. I don't even mind if you want to keep making it. Like I'm at that point now where if I don't enjoy it, that's fine. I guess to some degree, it's like don't ruin it.
But you degrade the story. Like for example, Scarlett Johansen, right?
But not if I don't watch it.
That's fair. But for example,
right? Like with Walking Dead, I just stopped.
Me too.
They killed Glenn, and I was just like, I'm done, man. Like that was way more than I needed to see. Like you're already killing one of my favorite characters of the entire series, and then you're gonna make me see him like that? Like, nah, dude. I was done. Like,
I watched one more season with the Negan episodes, and I just stopped caring. I'm like, the plot is always the same. It's too circular.
I was like super anti Jeffrey Dean Morgan for a while after that because he was
great in Supernatural.
I didn't like him when he showed up when I started watching.
No problem. But I think it's like I think they run into a problem, right? So on the flip side of that, I'm going to jump into Scarlett Johansson, is that you can create these worlds and characters, but you don't know when to make it the right situation for everybody involved, right? For example, it's not just Scarlett Johansson that's getting the okie doke by Marvel and Disney. It's also the writers and artists and creators of these characters. Like I read an article about the guy that created the Winter Soldier. He got like let's say $1,000 or maybe $10,000. It started with a 1 and some zeros, but they gross like almost $1 billion off the likeness and the character of the Winter Soldier, whether that's with Captain America in Civil War, whether that's with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So I think her argument's actually pretty good, you know? And I don't want to, like, I'm a big, like, I crush on her. So I was like, yeah, you know, but like business me is like, I can kind of see where she's coming from. If they told her in the contract, we're not going to, you know, do this, but then they do this plus this, she's got a good argument.
Disney has no leg to stand on when their argument is, well, you obviously don't appreciate the hard times we're all going through in this pandemic because your legally binding contract don't give a about no pandemic. Like, at the end of the day, it says you won't do this, and at the end of that same day, you did it. So, like, you guys are the ones. All you had to do was go to her and say, look, things are really crappy. We were hoping we were going to be out of this by now, but we want to get this out, and we think the best way to do it is this. In order to, obviously, you know, recoup or recompensate you for the loss of revenue from not doing it in the theater launch, we will, you know, pay X amount for the number of watches that it gets on our Disney Plus platform. Like, it's not that hard. But instead, Disney thought, well, what's she going to do? She's going to sue you for breach of contract.
I'll tell you this. She made that character. Like, the thing that Marvel and Disney have to understand, that they picked really good actors and actresses for the roles they picked.
The casting job was amazing. I mean, really, like, that A+. Yeah. For the fact that they picked people that could play the characters, but then that they also were able to convince to stick around to do all of the series and movies and everything. I mean, like...
They're screwed. As far as that goes, it's kind of like you're kind of screwed on that one because
like you kind of painted yourself into a corner, right? Like, where DC has on the other hand just kind of constantly cycled through new people playing these roles, but I think, you know, to some degree, like, that's what's led to some people really latching onto the Marvel characters more than the DC side, right? Like, you can get behind Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark for the entirety of, you know, Iron Man all the way through.
Even Iron Man 3.
And even Iron Man 3, not a great movie. I will still
Me
watch
too.
it because it's Robert Downey Jr. Like, I will roll my eyes at Guy Pearce and Gwyneth Paltrow and their
stuff,
heat bodies. Like, you know, whatever it is. Oh, you breathe fire now? You know, and all the cheesy lines that even, you know, which is hilarious because the guy who directed that movie also directed Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is one of my favorite Robert Downey Jr. movies. And it's also got, like, Val Kilmer right before the beginning of the end of Val Kilmer.
He's on a comeback.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, like, the first beginning.
I don't know. I support Scarlett Johansson. I don't, like, I'm not picking a dog in this fight. I think that both have good arguments. But I also believe, and we'll talk about this later on, is that as the company, you have to do right by the people that helped you to get where you're at. And I think Black Widow was a great movie. I know that a lot of people didn't like it, or they didn't give it like 5 out of 5 stars or 3 out of 3. But I thought it was a great movie. I think they did a good job, and I think she's got a very valid argument.
I mean, I don't know that I probably wouldn't give it 5 out of 5 stars. I would probably give it 4.
Okay.
You know, like,
and out of 3, 2 out of 3, right? It was a good movie.
Yeah, definitely 2 out of 3. Yeah. Maybe like a sliver more of that third one.
See my point? It.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I'm with you. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't a perfect movie, you know.
Oh, that's fair. Like, there were some plot gaps. I didn't like the villain that much.
Yeah, I mean, there were some things like any movie, you know, and especially like a superhero action.
But not
movie.
like the Suicide Squad.
I will say, like, the whole the city in the sky or whatever, the building in the sky that somehow Shield just has no idea is there. Like, you're telling me that in all their flying around with the helicarrier, they didn't at one point just bump into this, like, giant floating building?
It was over. It was over Russian controlled airspace.
I guess, but you'd like a satellite doesn't see that.
You're right. You're not wrong.
And then, but the best part was when they're falling, when the whole thing's like falling apart, and they're falling down and like running on the solar panels and stuff that are falling. I was just like, I remember seeing that in the trailer, and that was the stuff that made me think like, oh my god, this movie's gonna be terrible. But fortunately, like that was just a tiny little piece of it that wasn't the focus of it.
It was a good movie. I watched Sweet Girl with Jason Momoa, and it was a B movie, but it was actually a pretty good movie. Like I figured it out a little bit when they dropped the little hint to figure it out, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was watching with my wife, so I couldn't be like, oh, you're never gonna believe it, because she would have slapped me. So I didn't ruin the movie for her, but I was like, they did that very, very well, like very, very well. They have a couple. There's one point. Have you seen it?
No. I watched the trailer, but I haven't seen the movie.
Okay.
We ended up watching something else last night.
I won't give you any spoilers, but I'll tell you there's one point where like you're asking yourself what happened after the previous event, and you're right.
Yeah.
Like basically you're right.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of like, okay, I got it. And that's where I was just like, okay. And then I just didn't ruin the movie for my wife. It was a good movie.
I did really enjoy in the trailer where like Jason Momoa calls into whatever TV show the CEO of the company is on, and he's like, if my wife dies, it'll be, your death sentence or something along those lines. And like in the description of the movie, it's like, a man loses his wife to a pharmaceutical company. And I'm like, I wonder if his wife is going to die in this one, and Christy's like, yeah, and I'm like, no, I was just trying to be.
It was a really good movie. Like awesome. So the actress that played the lead, she was awesome. Like she did that role like fantastic. So Netflix is using that billions of dollars of investment pretty well.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty good at it. We were almost gonna watch that one, and then I felt like it was gonna be a little too heavy, and so I was in the mood for something a little bit more lighthearted.
The first 30 minutes is kind of heavy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. So we ended up watching Takers, which I had not seen before. It's got your boy Idris Elba.
God. Was it a good movie?
Sexiest Man Alive. No, it's another one of those.
It's a B movie.
Why does he keep making these movies? Like, who is his agent, and why has he not fired them yet? Like, this movie was made in 2010, I think. So it's old. It had like Paul Walker. Hayden Christensen, who thank God he wasn't in it any more than he was. He does catch a bullet in the end. So, spoiler alert for an 11-year-old movie. But yeah, I mean, it was just one of those. It was another like crappy heist kind of movie, Chris Brown was in it. Was it Michael Ealy, who I really like, but he was not very good in it. Like the writing was not good. T.I. was in it.
I have seen this movie. That's garbage.
Yeah, like he comes back. Yeah. And gets him to do the job that he like sell. Yeah.
That movie is garbage.
It's awful. It's terrible. I was like half paying attention because it was so bad.
You know what, man? Idris, I know you're not listening, but my dude, come on, man. You're like, you literally he's a good actor. And it's like, why do you keep taking these bum roles?
I mean, the trailer and the description made it look interesting enough that I was like, yo, I'll watch this. And, it gets to a point where you're kind of like, you're in it enough. It was like, what was the other one that I watched? This was like a month ago, but I don't think we talked about it. Wrath of Man with, Hobbs and Shaw.
Jason
Statham. Yeah, it's got Jason Statham in it. That's another terrible.
I'll tell you what, he's like one of the best action actors on the planet.
He's good, and he's good in it, but the movie itself is just terrible. There's nothing around it to, like, even the whole setup and everything. It just, none of it makes sense. It's like somebody had a very narrow idea, and we could make a movie out of that. And somebody else in the room was probably like, I don't think you can make a whole movie out of that. And they're like, and then, someone else is like, we've got Jason Statham under contract for 17 more films. I bet he'd take the role.
Yo, like there are a few actors, like Sean Connery was like that guy for me. It's like, man, don't ever do a crappy movie, man. And like he never did a crappy movie. It is just like, I guess, know your worth. You know what I'm saying? Like Idris is a great actor. I can't get behind him doing crappy movies. I just can't.
Yeah, it's getting kind of hard to. It's getting to the point now where I feel like everything that I choose that has him in it is bad, and so I'm going to stop wanting to watch movies that have Idris Elba in them, because I'm going to believe that somehow he's looking at scripts and thinking, I can save this. But no, Idris, you can't. Like, you can't save it. Just stop. Just give it
only
up.
Ryan Reynolds can save a crappy
die.
script, man. Because
I mean, apparently,
like I want to see.
Speaking of which,
Free Guy, I want to see it just because he's in it.
What about Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard?
I haven't watched it yet. Have you seen it?
Okay, yeah, we watched it.
It's just Ryan Reynolds saving the movie, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Like those movies to me feel like Sam Jackson's least amount of effort he's ever put.
He just has to say
film
for like once or twice.
Yeah, I think in the second one, what's her name? Selma Hayek.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right, like she really is the one who makes that movie. Ryan Reynolds has some really good lines too, for sure. Like the two of them together is probably what it. But like she drops a whole bunch of mother and other profanities, and with her little, Spanish accent.
She's amazing.
Yeah,
love her. Love her.
But yeah, so like that one was pretty good. I enjoyed that.
Again, so Idris, like, and not trying to give you career advice because you are the sexiest man alive. I've never been that guy, dude. Like, you should be hitting home runs, man. Like,
see, but I feel like this is karma for him.
Why?
This is what he gets for
being the sexiest man alive.
No, I was gonna say for what was his character's name on The Wire?
I never watched that show.
Bomani Jones is always talking about how much he hates that character and like has a hard time sometimes seeing Idris Elba in other things because all he sees is this horrible person from
Baltimore.
The Wire.
I can't watch.
But really, because I never watched The Wire either, it's his role from The Office, Charles on The Office, that I hated him so much. He was so unreasonably like mean, and I laugh because part of me thinks like that's exactly what you would do if you walked into that office. Like you'd see Jim in a tuxedo, and you'd be like, "Really? Like you got time for games? You could be selling more, Okay, can I get that rundown? Let me get that rundown."
And I love that character. I was like, that's so dope.
Yeah, and I hated it because at the time I was like, no, I'm like
you're
Jim,
right? I am not Jim.
I was a Jim. Yeah,
I started watching this guy on YouTube. His channel is The Company Man. Brilliant. Like that's like I could not coming at you, dude, but I could definitely do that whole channel and love it. It's so addictive.
Oh, was this the one that you sent me? Talking about why Costco?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like the video is interesting. Like I think he does a good job of kind of breaking it down.
And I know that I'm a self-proclaimed business genius, but it's always the fundamentals, right? The things that we always talk about. Hey, your customers don't care about your problems, right? Your employees don't care about your crap. Just treat them right? And the Costco video is a pretty good depiction of that. They actually sell at a loss. They pay their employees better than the average. Those are things that people should get behind. And it's like I've been addicted to watching like multiple episodes. I'm like, yeah, I could totally do that channel because I agree with, not just because I agree, because it's true, right? And I like the fact that he'll take the balance sheets, he'll take the company earnings statements, and because they're all public if they're publicly traded, and talk about them. And those are all things that people that invest actually look at. It's like, no, your comp sales are shit. Like, you shouldn't open any more stores, or you have too many stores, or you have. I'm like, yeah, that's totally dope. So, I say that to say this: there's a very good. If we use the tools and the resources we had for good, it'd be beneficial, not just porn. But I really do enjoy the Company Man YouTube channel. Another one is Cracked. I sent you the one about the mega churches.
Yes. That was pretty funny.
What did you think about that? It was hilarious.
I mean, it was exactly what you expected. I mean, yeah, it's just the over-the-top, satire.
Yeah.
But, I mean, very accurate, right down to the
35-year-old
leader who has no experience and, is facing multiple harassment charges and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it's, what was the other one? Oh, you sent me the Jordan Klepper, best interaction with the Trump folks, and I couldn't even watch it all the way
Trump
through
review?
Because any of that, it still frustrates me. I saw him trying to convince people in Alabama now to go get vaccinated, and I was just like, no, it's too late for that. You made your bed and you're gonna lie in that. They don't want to hear it. They're gonna boo you now when you tell them to go get vaccinated. That's how bad you messed this up.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about politics.
Yeah, I don't really want to, but...
It's time for politics.
I don't know how I feel about that. Last week you said something where, it made me think and kind of push back on myself, where I was like, well, somebody commits a heinous crime, murder is probably a good, you should probably give them the death penalty. And you push back. And even after we recorded, I was like, am I right on that? Right. I don't have a stance. If that makes sense. It's kind of like I kind of had to draw back and say, well, how do I really feel about this? For me, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely.
I'm empathetic and sympathetic. When you telling me about your family, how you guys are, I'm like, well, does that same thing translate to people I love and care about? Right. And it's always you can believe that all you want. Don't marry it, because until it hits your front door, you don't really know how you feel about it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I often catch myself in that same circle. I do know when it comes to COVID and Afghanistan, because those are the top two things in the news, that as a country, our bias is showing. We literally, to use a former executive from E-Area's phrase, we literally shit the bed on this one, right? In both cases. Yeah. And I don't have a solve for it. I want to be empathetic and try to show some type of sympathy, but I'm struggling with it.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with Afghanistan. I'm not an expert on foreign policy or war, or hunting down terrorists in foreign countries, nor do I play one on TV.
I like that. That was pretty good.
I understand that there's a lot of people that have felt like we didn't really have much business kind of being there in the first place, at least not to the degree that we were, and think things could have been handled differently that probably wouldn't have led to where we are right now, right? Spent a lot of money to basically end up in the same position we were in when we went over there. I also understand's probably not No, I do. Like, I understand the President Biden's administration saying, like, we're getting out of this. We're done. Like, this is it. I think it probably could have been handled a little bit better than how it ultimately got executed, right? I mean, the stampede of people to the airports and the Air Force bases to try and get airlifted out and evacuated has been a complete shit show, like, on a massive scale. Right. And there's no way that they shouldn't have had some... It's kind of like January 6th, where it's like, there's no reason you shouldn't have known that this was a possibility, at least. If not, like, a strong possibility that this was going to happen. So ultimately, like, yeah, I think they botched it, but... And I don't buy the argument of, like, well, this is going to happen no matter how we did it, right? Like, I get the idea that, yes, like, you're creating a power vacuum over there, and most likely the Taliban were going to fill that vacuum. That part, like, I get that. Yeah, sure. That was always kind of inevitable in that regard. But the unnecessary, like, panic that has set in, I think, is more where I take issue with kind of how things have unfolded. Again, this is maybe, we find out this was the best case scenario, that trying to plan all this stuff would have allowed for opportunities to attack and, weaken or, kill lots of other people. Like, I don't know, but it seems like there should have been a better way to kind of handle all of this. But I mean, what do you do when you spend 15 years in a foreign country, blowing up huge swaths of their infrastructure, and then leave without really fixing any of it? Like,
so
sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's fair. One of the facts of the argument still holds true. We took down the Taliban 20 years ago with less than 300 troops, all special ops. So that's a placeholder, right? What I kind of struggle with is the fact that the prior administration did not implement anything they negotiated prior to leaving office. And they had, like, probably, let's say, 75 to 90 days to do some of that. And then I would say the aftermath of Afghanistan is very similar to me of the aftermath of Vietnam, where we let politicians get in the way. Now, I firmly believe that once we killed Osama bin Laden as a country, we should have, like, pulled out and called it a day. Probably, like, hunkered down in Iraq, and then left Iraq in the Middle East from Iraq as opposed to Afghanistan, where we had most of our troops. So on a chessboard, I believe that President Biden's right. Like, at the end of the day, there was not much, as we're trying to honor an agreement that was made with the prior administration, which should have probably never been made during an election year.
Yeah, but let's nominate and vote on some Supreme Court justices while we're
just
at
saying.
There's time for that, and there's time for this, but
I'm gonna throw that.
No, I know. I mean,
on a chessboard, like, our options, and this is not to be like or desensitize myself to the fact that there's been loss of life. There have been people. I watched a video of somebody falling from an airplane, like 2 or 3 people, and I was like, what the actual fuck is going on, right?
Yeah.
And it was hard for me to watch, but they played it again, and I watched it again. I'm like, this is really happening. So the math never made sense for it to not be chaotic. But when you look at it objectively, we as a country, not an administration, set up that stage. Yeah. So now we have, like, 5,600 troops and some NATO forces over there. What if they swarm on the Kabul airport? If we have to delay, right? If we can't figure out a way to, like, fine tune that. So there are things where it's like, at the end of the day, we agree we want to get out. We've already implemented a strategy. it's going to be messy. We got to suck it up. And that sounds very, 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 very messed up to say. But we're past planning implementation of the exit strategy. We're way past
those
that.
parts were already done. At this point, we have to implement what was already set out.
Yeah, and that's, I mean,
that's where I feel like we're very much in the same ballpark there, where it's like, I get that there were some limitations, right? Like some significant limitations in terms of what the options were.
Right.
And so it could be that what we're seeing before us is the best case scenario.
I've said this time and time again. When former President Bush left office, got back to Texas and said, look, I made the best decisions with what I had. Like, I don't want, if this is the best case scenario, I don't want to see what options B and C were.
Well, yeah,
that's like literally, if this is the best we got, it's kind of like we're not in that office right now. Like we can't even like pull a trigger on that.
Yeah, definitely not.
I mean, I would assume the other options are we redeploy 300,000 troops and we shut it down. Like,
but are you really shutting it down, or are you just delaying again?
Nope. You shut this time. You shut it. Like if you eliminate the political like strife on Vietnam, the U.S. would have probably shut Vietnam down. Right? You eliminate the political strife on Iraq, we literally shut down Iraq. If you eliminate like how people feel about Afghanistan, understand this: all the Taliban's in the same spot right now. Like you shut it down. And you, like...
I guess I just don't see why... I mean, because we had that many troops over there at some points, right?
Because politics became the play. Like, when politics becomes a play, and we're spending billions and trillions of dollars to, like, add infrastructure, blah, 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 most of the native people of that country don't want that. That's not what they really want. And that's just, like, being honest. I don't want a well. I'm used to going, 30 miles to get water or whatever it may be. Like we didn't, as a country, I don't think we asked what they wanted, right?
Well, yeah, it's like the equivalent of the startup company that's like, hey, we don't have healthcare, but we do have pool tables and snacks and beer, right? And it's like, no, I'd rather have healthcare. Well, we didn't ask you. We're just telling you that this is what you get instead.
Yeah. So there's a lot of unknowns that people are like jumping the gun on, saying we should, like, nope, let's stop, right? Let's be respectful of like where we literally are right now. There are things that predicated what we did today.
Yeah.
It may not be pretty. It may not be like the Disney picture you're looking for. But we're going to try to accomplish getting out. But if we had to, like literally, we could probably shut down the Taliban. We did it with less than 300 troops.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Like,
but do you want to really destabilize
exactly.
the entire region?
Right. Which is part of the whole point, right? Like they were, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm with you in that. Like, I don't have the solution. I don't know what the better option was.
Fuck the better. Pardon me, but fuck the better option. What were the worst two options? There had to be 4 options on the desk.
Well, sure. I don't want to know what the worst options were. Gee, like you said, like this is as bad enough as it is. Like if this was a best case scenario, like I'm glad this is where we're at, and it's not one of the other ones. But I guess I just meant like in terms of our entire engagement there in Afghanistan, that just
we should have pulled out after Bin Laden.
Yeah, I mean that would have been the right timing behind everything. But
we didn't.
There was money to be made.
Just saying. Like I'm just saying. Like, yo, we got dude, we found him, they put bullets in his head, they dumped his body off and like completely disrespected his family. So like in hindsight, like if you don't want to cause a war, right?
Oh no, I mean I'm with you on that. But that's what we do, It's like, oh, we killed you, and now we're gonna piss on you too.
Yeah.
Like he's fucking dead. Like, what You feel better now? Okay.
I mean, so like there were some there were actions that were going to happen because of how we handled that. Not placing blame on anybody, but let's say collectively on prior administrations, please stop pointing fingers. Like I saw Bush, leave a video message about how we care about, like, dude, I hear you, but come on, dude, your hands are dirty. President Obama has been quiet. I appreciate that. The fat boy, he had something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, like what? Like you set all these plays in motion, and he went past a couple months to try to like at least make it a little bit better, and it's still a shit show. So
no, I mean he does what he does, and he just says it would have been so much better if I had been there. I would have done it right, and that's all he ever does. And then when he is there, and it doesn't go right, it's not his fault.
Yeah.
It was somebody else. It was either the person that he put in charge, which isn't his fault. I mean,
he hires only the best people.
Yeah, and yet all of the best people ultimately get fired because they can't stand working with him.
Well, let's talk about the scumbags since we're already there. So, Lauren Boebert, her husband is a consultant for a gas company.
Yeah.
Almost $500,000 unreported, and she still has a job.
Yeah.
Can't believe it.
I mean, I can. Like, there's... How much pressure finally did it take before Cuomo resigned? Like,
oh man, I knew you were gonna do that.
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, and I'm not trying to bring that up to specifically like stick it to you, but I'm just saying like that's where we are at this point, right? We went from Al Franken, where a picture, right, and somebody saying like, yeah, he kind of like groped me inappropriately or made an inappropriate gesture. Dude, like immediately resigned, right?
That's fair. I'll give you that.
And now we're at the point where, you've got multiple people claiming improprieties. You have an investigation that's ongoing, and then that turns up evidence. And he was still like, "No, I'm good." I mean, you gonna expect the governor of New York to retire? I'm not perverted. I'm Italian. Hey!
It's not even a good New York accent.
No, it's terrible. But that's what I'm like. I mean. We've been sitting here like, not we, but people have been upset about Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and all of these people who they feel like have done horrible things or have been accused of doing horrible things, and they still have jobs, right? Still have places in the government, still have, representativeship or whatever it is. And I'm just, why people are amazed at this point is beyond me.
But what gets me is like the Republicans are... They're like Teflon Dons in this stuff.
Yeah. Well, because ultimately they realize that their voters don't care. They don't care about those things. All they care about is how are they going to vote. Will they vote for no gun control and for abortion control? Like, those are the things that they care about. And not all of them, I know, but like
79%
that's a
of
huge
them.
Exactly. I mean, it's the vast majority of that party or that voting bloc. Those are the two things that they care about. And the freedom of religion, which really means my religion is enforced on everybody else.
Yeah. Well, those are our scumbags. And Marjorie, I guess Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they both got married. All right.
Okay. Like to each other, or
no. Some chick actually married this kid.
Children would have hooves. Was it? He was engaged before, wasn't he? Like, he's been engaged for a while.
Yeah, he married that chick. So I guess that.
Okay.
And some reporting says that he actually asked Trump for his blessing. I'm like,
oh, good.
I'm like, yo, come on, my dude. Like, you got to get off that. It's what I'm actually waiting for now, and I'm going to call it. I think there's going to be an implosion of the GOP. They just can't. They can't keep...
I mean, I'm waiting for it.
They can't, man. They cannot. There's... Like, math doesn't work that way. Like, there's no way you can have that much contention inside of a group of people that doesn't, like... You don't implode.
But see, like, this is where I think the GOP figured out something
Yeah, fear.
But that the Republicans or the Democrats have never really been able to understand, and that is that on the GOP side, they have a relatively solid voting block, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, more or less, in both chambers, they can get people to just step in line with whatever it is that the party leadership wants. You have a couple of, like, Cheney and Kissinger and those guys who are, like, the little stragglers out there, but 99.9% of them are going to, whatever Mitch McConnell wants them to vote, that's how they're going to vote. And Democrats are like, no, it's cool. I mean, you've got your opinion, and I'm not saying it's right. Like, this is where I struggle, where it's like I want Democrats to fix stuff, but I don't want them to do it the way that the GOP has been operating. Like, I don't want that to become standard operating procedure for politics, because that's no better when it's on the other foot. Right. Like, you know, it's what we've talked about, in that what you don't end up with is any collaboration, right? You don't, it's this, and it's not collaboration for the sake of collaboration, but like, can we actually come up with what's the best idea to solve these problems?
Right.
You know, like, all of the Democrats aren't going to have all of the good ideas. All of the Republicans aren't going to have all the good ideas. And it's not necessarily about compromise, but how do we get the best out of both groups to be the stuff that rises to the top? Whereas now it seems like it's much more likely that it's the crap from each group that's going to rise to the top, because those are the ones, like we've talked about, who are being the loudest. You know, they're the ones who are screaming and just clamoring for attention. And for a while, like, I was as guilty as the next person of giving it to them. You know, like, yeah, go progressive agenda. I don't care what you do. Just get rid of this stupid GOP, right? I mean, like, there was a sense of that. Exactly. You know, it was like, but at the same time, like, I'll be honest, like, going into that whole election in 2020, I kind of thought that this is how things would ultimately play out if the Democrats won, right? That it would be like, okay, we won, but we still have to say that everything is bipartisan, because ultimately, like, that's who we are as a party. We're all about, like, extending, you know, our hand across the aisle to, you know, bring our brothers from the red over. And it's like, I get that, but to some degree you have to say, like, guys, this is what the country needs.
Well,
you're either on board with us or you're not.
The centrists and the moderates are, like, going to become like the weight that drowns the Democrats, in my opinion. They don't,
and that's, again, right, like, an issue that the GOP does not suffer from.
Yeah, they're lock and step with whatever is going to get them reelected, and there is no. I don't think there is a middle ground on that. Here's what I think, and it's probably shorter than your thoughts. It's like
I don't think that was a compliment, but okay.
It was in its own little way. I think that at the end of the day, right is right and wrong is wrong, right? You can only steal so many times before you get caught. And I don't think we have the runway as a country to, like, test those bounds. And that's what I think that the Republicans are doing. I think the Democrats are spectators to that event. And they're flirting with the idea of, is that what we do next? Kind of to your point, right? To win. Yeah. At the end of the day, you fail by coloring outside the lines. It's just not going to work.
I mean, if your opponent is cheating, right, to win, you cheating to win does not make it fair.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't make your, you know, oh, well, they were cheating too, so it you know, my cheating is totally warranted and valid because they were also cheating. No, like, you still did the wrong thing. At the end of the day, you're both wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, FFS, two wrongs don't make a right. I tell my 7-year-old all the time. America, like, but that's, I mean, honestly, like, it's not the same, but it does play a little bit into my feelings on what we talked about last time, just with, like, the death penalty and everything. You know, like, that taking another life for someone who took a life doesn't make that other life come back. It doesn't
rectify the situation.
Yeah, that's not justice in that same sense. Where
I respect that. I told you I respect that. It's a good a good pushback, but it's like, for the sake of
But what do you do with those people?
Yeah,
like, that's the other question. So we're just going to stick them in a jail cell and But to some degree, I'm kind of like, yeah, like, all right, your punishment is you don't get to be part of society. You know, like you are removed from society and all of that. And maybe that's not enough for some people. But to me, like, you know, the whole, like, I would rather 1,000 guilty men go free than one innocent man not. And I guess to some degree, like, I feel that way. And I feel like as a country, we've started to flip that, where it's like, no, man, I don't care if we have to punish some innocent people. The guilty ones are going to get it. Like,
yeah, and that gets into the whole philosophical debate about what, or the real definition of justice, right? And there's,
sure,
that's where, you know, I kind of got stuck at last week. I'm like, oh, that's a fair point, right? I don't know, but I think the Democrats need to try harder. I would propose it is like stack up the bills. You modify them as administrations change, and you work on that agenda. But the agenda's got to be with foresight. It can't be on the short-term view.
You cannot rewrite your agenda every 2 years.
Yes, you can. You can.
Okay.
Not much is going to change. We've been bitching about healthcare for years. We've been bitching
but
about.
That's what I'm sure. But I'm saying, like, ultimately you have to have an actual game plan, and it seems like
so we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to argue with you. I was agreeing. And
Okay.
trying to help make your point, but I'll just back off since obviously you don't want my.
We're not having that today, yo. Anyway, so let's go to life.
Life.
So I sent you an article about the typical American Gen Xer, and you actually said that you probably align more with that than.
Yeah, I think I do. Like, I mean, I have older parents,
Right.
you know, so I think that plays a little bit of a role. Like, they were in their early to mid 30s, I think, when they had me, and so, like, I'm kind of dealing with that. Like, I've got a kid that I'm raising, but I've also got parents who I don't like take care of them. It's not like
Right.
But I'm at that. I know that's not. It's potentially not too far off into the future where they're going to need help. You know, just.
I thought that article was very insightful, and what I got out of it was, like, I say a lot of the same things that the journalist was mentioning. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like 80% of my worldview. You know, somebody's car.
Yeah, I was sitting here like, is that here or there? And I'm like, no, that's definitely there.
It is 80% of my worldview. Like, you think about it, it's now 3 major crises, and in my lifetime, it's like people are complaining about what? Like, this is normal, right? So I found it very insightful that you said that. Yeah, I lean more towards that than millennials.
And I mean, granted, right? Like, we've talked about this before, that I am on the top end in terms of age for my group, right? Like, I was born in 84, so I'm 37. So like, 83 is when the millennial typically kind of starts. So I'm right on that cusp of kind of being in the Gen X group as it is. But I think, like, I'm probably not. Well, I guess it's not really true. I was gonna say I'm not as old, which I mean, like, yes, but
you gotta stop calling me old, yeah. Like,
no, I wasn't trying to call you old. I said as old.
Oh.
Age itself is not a bad characteristic to have, right?
Sure,
experience.
You can say that when you're younger, but
no, but see, it's funny because, like, we talk about we've talked a lot in the past about life experience, right? And that somebody who's 25, it's not that you're not smart or that you don't understand these things, you just haven't experienced them,
right?
You know, and that as you experience these things, it can and often does influence the way that you view tangential topics or, you know, related things. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately for some reason. It's just been coming up more and more as it's like, you know, like, I get that, you know, like, someone who's only had a couple of jobs and, you know, is maybe generally had success is not going to see someone's struggles in the same light as someone
Right.
who's who's worked really hard and had a lot of issues and overcome a lot of obstacles that, but at the same time you see some people who in that situation are like, well, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, you can do it too. Like they have no empathy for the person in that situation.
But then you have to look at like those actual generations, right? Because that may not be far from the truth, right? Because if you grew up in the 80s, if you started your career in the 90s, there was a lot of pulling up from the bootstraps because things were like, oh crap, they're falling apart a lot. So I don't think that term is inherently bad. I just think it's inherently just misunderstood. It's very dismissive of the fact that people have challenges. And then when you like throw the complicated factor and variable of race into that, it takes on a whole nother dynamic, which a lot of people can't relate to. And then when you shy on the side of a quote unquote conservative viewpoint on those things, it gets even more complicated if you're non-white. So all those things are true, but they're not always the facts of the situation. It's basically, it's all perception. And that's kind of weird to say, but I've been thinking about it a lot too. I'm like, I've listened to a lot of stories about how people, especially children, struggled with school during COVID, and how there's been a lot of like social anxiety, and their performance in school dropped because of how things change. And I was very desensitized to it because I'm like, yeah, but not everything goes your way all the time, so get over it. But that's basically how I was programmed, because I was a latchkey kid, or I had to learn how to adapt, or I had to learn how to face adversity. I was talking to my wife, and maybe I talked about this last week, and I think that a lot of times kids typically struggle now because they haven't had to face adversity, and I think that's been a lot of the challenges that younger people have faced in our society, especially during the pandemic. It's like things have generally been good all the time. And you haven't had to struggle or go without. So, just those are just my thoughts. I just find it very interesting.
No, and it's, I think for me, obviously, your life experience, like we were just talking about, heavily influences the way that you kind of see these things. And so I think for me growing up, I wasn't aware of much in the way of struggle, right? Like there were times where we didn't have much money, and we're kind of like slapping things together, but it wasn't ever like the whole family was like, we're broke. Like everybody needs to understand.
Your lights were never cut off?
We had the power cut off once.
Oh, that's good.
I think that I recall. And this was before college. Like I had power cut off all the time in college because I didn't get to pay my bills. Spend that beer money. But yeah, it was just like I didn't even realize it when the power got cut off. Like, I immediately went to my neighbor and was like, hey, you guys got power? Our power's out. And he was like, yeah, we got power. And my mom's like, would you shut up? Like, get back in the house. I don't need the whole neighborhood knowing we just had the power turned off, Chris.
That's hilarious.
I mean, like that, that was just...
Your mom is getting a hug for that. She's would you shut up? Why are you telling people my business?
Exactly. I mean, it was good, but it was one of those things. I guess at that point, I'd never really thought about like paying your bills, and like that when you don't pay your bills, like they turn that stuff off, like power is just one of those things as a kid that you think is always there. Right. It's just power. The only reason it gets turned off is because there's a storm, right? Like the power got knocked out. It's not the power company said you can't have any anymore, like even in California with rolling brownouts and blackouts and stuff, it was never like
you can't be the odd man out.
Yeah, right? I'm not like, just us? That seems like a weird brownout, but okay.
That's
what
funny.
about you, neighbor over here? Shut up, Chris! Yeah.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, so like, but it never... it was never one of those things where I was like, oh man, like we must. Even then, I probably just assumed it was more like, oh, we forgot to pay it, you know.
Right.
But then growing up later, I found out like, oh no, like we were pretty broke at that moment.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, like, I think you know, to some degree, like my parents, I think, just tried not to make a big deal about it, you know, or make it like a thing that the whole family worried about. I think they kind of worried about it on their own, and we're like, well, the kids, you know, we don't need to burden them. But I know that like that's not an option for everybody. Not
Right.
everybody can make it seem like everything is fine, and that's so I understand that in a lot of ways, like as bad as it may have been for us, it's probably nowhere near as bad as it's been for a lot of other people. So I certainly don't, you know, look at that and go like, man, I really had it rough that one time our power got cut out growing up. Like, I don't want to be that guy that everybody's coming at afterwards being like, dude, like, no, I get it. I'm just saying, like, this is my experience.
No, I think that's dope though, and I think that you know you always look at life through a filter, right?
Yeah.
You just have to decide how you want that filter to be, and
I want a fisheye lens, so everything's
yeah.
all like, ooh.
and I think like I didn't know that about you. That's kind of dope, right? So like you know we'd have the power cut off is like because mom's broke. Yo, you got to make that sandwich last for a minute, yo. Like, and
Yeah.
but you learn from those experiences, and I think that, and I don't say that people have to go through those things to be an adult.
Right.
I think adversity also helps you to build character, and it kind of helps you to you know have level footing. So, another thing I thought was interesting about their article is that Gen Xers are typically they have higher debt. Although they have
Right.
higher wealth, but it's typically in assets.
Yeah.
Those are things where you want to kind of like you can learn from those things if you're a millennial or if you're whatever generation my daughter is. I don't know what they call them.
Generation, is it Gen Z?
Z, yeah,
Gen
yeah.
Z,
Yeah.
right?
But
Yeah.
I also I often get like kind of offended that we have to group everybody into categories. It's like.
But it's like everything. I mean, you know, like we as a species, I guess, which is its own categorization,
right.
love to group things because it makes it easier for us to understand and remember them.
But it also takes away, like, so one of the things I learned in a sociology class and then later on in life was that one of the greatest desires for human beings is to be understood, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we categorize things,
we're doing the exact opposite.
We're doing the exact opposite. So it's like, well, what do we want? We desire to be understood. And when you remove that from the equation, it makes it the unknown variable. But what generation are you? No, we need to have a shared understanding. Because if you look through all the threads of all the different, you know, categories that we have, they're all pretty similar.
Right.
It's just
I mean, ultimately, like, what's the point of having generations other than to compare them, right? I mean, it's why we group and categorize and label everything else, so we can say, okay, I have an acorn from this oak tree and I have an acorn from this oak tree. How are they the same? How are they different? And we do the same thing with generations, right? Except that because it has a personal element to it, just like I think with race, right? And nationality and a lot of these other things where it's like, then it becomes your bias of, you know, like, well, I'm from California, so I only like California oak trees, you know, or whatever it is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, my generation is the best because of this. And you have the generations on either side like, that generation's crap. They didn't have to deal with this. And it's like, well, yeah, because you guys did that. Isn't that a good thing? Yeah. Like, shouldn't we not have to fight Nazis again because you guys fought them the first time?
or you know, finish the job. Like, why did you start it?
I mean, it's funny because, of course, I'm going to relate this to pop culture in some way, shape, or form. But there's an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where the Captain Holt.
I'm sorry, you're killing me.
It's okay.
How do you keep all this shit indexed in your head, yo?
I don't know. I just do. I watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine a lot. It's one of my favorite shows. But Captain Holt had set up this, you know, group that was like the African American police. Gay Police Detectives Association. It was like had this ridiculously long name, and it was for like a very kind of like niche group
for two people
within it. Yeah, but it had grown significantly, and so he had always been like the president, and this, young member comes to him and is like, hey, I just wanted to say, like, I really appreciate the organization, and that's why I'm letting you know, like, I'm going to be running against you for president. I have some ideas that I think could help, bring the group into the next generation, blah, 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 make it whatever. And so at first Holt's like, oh, who's this young whippersnapper who thinks he's coming at me? Like, we're going to destroy him. And someone finally, he's like, well, he didn't have to go through all this stuff that I did. And she's like, isn't that the point? Like, shouldn't we be celebrating the fact that he didn't have to face all of that discrimination and go through all those hardships because the previous generation, you, made it so he doesn't have to do that? Like, you made things better now. You helped to do that. And I think, in a way, like, generationally, that's how we should be looking at this. It's not like, kids these days have it so easy with their technology. Yeah, because, previous generations busted their ass to figure out how to make that technology work. I mean, you have the entire world in your pocket, basically, at this point. You can contact and reach anybody at any point, more or less. And we look at that as some sort of hindrance to our society and connection, as
That's
opposed
fair.
to, like the fact that, I mean, yeah, if it weren't for all of the generations before, we never would have come up with that.
Well, that's a good place to close, man. Look at Brooklyn Nine-Nine dropping knowledge over here. I'm like, that was actually pretty, it's pretty dope.
Yeah.
And, wow, I got nothing. I literally have nothing. That was dope.
I think that's the first time this has ever happened on a podcast episode where Chris, like, just had the thing to close it out at the end there.
Yeah. Look at Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That's some
Right?
dope stuff.
Captain Holt is one of my favorite characters. He's great.
Yeah, I'm not gonna even try. Like, I can't even. I got nothing for that. That's actually pretty dope. I mean, all I say like is we need to appreciate and like respect the shared knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what you encapsulated right there with that Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference.
This is why, Andre. This is why I keep this all up here, because at some point it's going to come in handy. It's going to help me make my point.
Yeah, you shut me down right there. I'm like, yeah, that's dope. I respect that. Yeah, we're super glad you guys joined us. We have episodes coming out.
We just released one today. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
It's like 6 months old.
I know,
Not
right?
quite that long.
I
but-
hope not. But hopefully what we'll do is we'll be able to catch up here soon. My boy's getting married. Super excited about that. So I'm going to go hang out with him and share with his family that special, awesome day. I'm like really excited. My checkbook's excited too because
It's like, Chris, no more weddings. This is it.
like you got to just like cut it out. Like,
No, I understand, and I do appreciate the sacrifice from everybody.
No, and I say this from the bottom of my heart. I'm really happy for you. And I don't get to see Christy a lot, but tell her I said what's up, and I'm really happy for you guys. I'm excited to be there, and get to see my little buddy.
Yep.
So we got that coming up. Life is happening, so hopefully soon we'll get these 7 or 8 episodes. We're probably just going to change our format, just get them published. So you guys hopefully like them, and we'll get back on track sooner than later. But you can always catch us on. Wow, man, I haven't said this in so long I forgot.
It's been a week since we recorded an episode. I think I did hit the outro music early last time, so I don't even think you got to go through it, so maybe that's why.
Okay, so you can catch us on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and if you're super adventurous, on our website we actually have our RSS feed. We're glad you joined us. If you have any comments you'd like to send to us, you can always send those to comment@chrisandandreshow.com. Nope, that's wrong. It's the Chris and Andre Show. Yeah, no, it's what is it? It's comments@chrisandandreshow.com.
Yep.
I'm Andre at chrisandandreshow.com, and
I'm Chris at chrisandandreshow.com.
man, we're getting rusty. But as always, I'm Andre,
And I'm Chris.
and we're glad you joined us. You're such an idiot.
What did I do?